Welcome to Camp Maddie, Pet Inclusive Housing Edition. I'm Diana Cruz, Program Director at HEART LA. That's Housing, Equity, and Advocacy Resource Team. We're based in Los Angeles, and you'll hear more about what we do a bit later on in the program.
Hi, I'm Jillian McMillian, and I'm a lived experience advocate for the homeless, a newly certified cat behaviorist, now accepting job offers, and a proud advocate and board member for My Dog is My Home.
Next up are me and my colleagues from HEART LA. That's the Housing, Equity, and Advocacy Resource Team. HEART LA is dedicated to ensuring that legal protections for tenants with pets aren't just theoretical, but applied in the real world to prevent housing insecurity. Many tenants, especially those with assistance animals, face legal barriers and discrimination from landlords despite existing protections. Our mission is to bridge this gap by using interventions to secure housing rights and provide tenants with the security they deserve. We believe that no one should be forced to choose between their home and their pet, and our work focuses on keeping people and their companions animals together. In this presentation, I'll be joined by my colleagues, Diana Prado and Zaira Bernal, to talk about Paws and laws, keeping people and pets together and housed.
Hello, and hello, everyone. We're so excited to be here. Again, thank you for Maddie's and Michelson for having us. And we are going to just start this off and start our presentation. So today we're going to be talking about keeping people and their pets together and housed. In all of our presentations, we first like to give a land acknowledgement. As housing rights advocates, we recognize that we are part of a land back movement. And in recognizing that, in Los Angeles, we are part of the Chumash, Kizh peoples and Tongva lands. And you can also go to a website, and you can also check what indigenous land that you are on. Diana Cruz already told you a little bit about us. We are a legal nonprofit that helps keep people and their pets together and housed. We do eviction prevention, also some eviction defense, and we also are out in the community providing information to tenants with pets and working with animal rights organizations to be able to bridge the gap between animal welfare and housing rights advocates. And so why do we exist? How did this come to be? So 47,000 evictions were filed last year in LA County, which means that every hour, 5 families are being evicted. And these numbers are now higher than they were pre the pandemic. And in order to be able to keep people and their pets together housed, we need to be able to prevent evictions, and we need to also recognize the evictions that exist. Thanks to the Human Animal Support Services, there is a pet eviction calculator, and about an estimated 305,000, so about 306,000 pets are facing evictions in LA County alone in the next 1 to 3 months. And so going back to why we exist, this means that it's so important to be able to keep people and their pets together in their homes. It means that an average of about 2 pets per household. So of the 5 households that are being evicted, those households have about 2 pets per households that are also facing eviction. Owner surrenders are due to a housing situation. 24% that this was the reason for moving. And this was thanks to a pet inclusive housing report through Michelson Found Animals. And so how can you help? What are some action steps that you can take? The first question that we say that you can ask anybody that's coming to you in regards that's facing eviction or feeling threats of eviction is, did they receive any written documentation from the owner? This is important because in every state across the United States, there needs to be an actual legal process that has to be started in order for a person to be facing eviction. If not, then it's just a threat of eviction. And so the important question is, did you receive anything in writing? If they didn't receive anything in writing, what that means is, while it's not very fun and it's not great at all, they're just being threatened with eviction. But that doesn't mean they have to move. That doesn't mean they have to go anywhere. And even if they do receive something in writing, that doesn't mean that at that moment in time, they have to move either. There's going to be another slide where I'm going to explain at least the eviction process in California. But the first question to ask and how you can help is, did you get anything in writing? Also, the second question is, who is the pet closest to? And how does this pet help this person? This leads us to asking and this leads us to recognizing if there's any fair housing rights that are available to the person. If this person is a person with a disability, if the animal is a support animal, this gets us to trying to talk about that question and also talk about that question in a way that isn't very legalese, right? So who is the pet the closest to? Tell us more about your pet. How does this pet help support this person? It gets the person talking about their pet, which kind of alleviates an already stressful situation because people love to talk about their pets and their companion animals, and also gets them opening up about what their animal means to them or the person that it's closest to. Also, the next question that's great to ask is, how long have you lived in your home? This also gets us to another more legal protections that are available to tenants, depending on whether, how long they've lived in their home, how long the owner has known about their pets, which is the next question. How long has the owner and management been aware of their pets? Which also leads us to being able to recognize if there's different rights available to them and different protections that's available to them. And so now, what is an eviction or an unlawful detainer? An eviction, as I was saying before, there has to be a legal process in every state in order to be able to render somebody homeless, to kick them out of their home. Every legal eviction requires at least a written notice. And every eviction requires a court filing. It's different in each state. We have a link here that you'll be able to go to later to see what those laws and regulations are specifically in each state. But the most important thing that we want to stress in this presentation in terms of an eviction or unlawful detainer is that you do not have to leave your home and you can fight back, right? So if there's not a written notice, that means you're being harassed. Do not what we call self-evict yourself. Do not leave your home out of the threat or fear that you're going to be evicted. You can fight back. At Heart LA, this is what we do in Los Angeles. We help you fight those evictions or prevent those evictions. And if you're being harassed, then there are different organizations and different agencies that can help you with depending on what that type of harassment is. Oh. And now I'm going to pass this on to my wonderful colleague, Diana Cruz, another Diana.
Thank you, Prado. I realized that I didn't really get a chance to kind of introduce myself, but I came into this world because I was a client. I used to be a client of Heart. Back in 2018, the building that I lived in, the entire building was being evicted, and every single family had a pet. And through various organizations, I finally was able to find Heart LA. And look at me now, I am still here. It's like I never left. But this is something that is very near and dear to me. And I run a lot of the data. So I'm gonna make some numbers. I'm gonna throw some numbers at you that have been put together. I'm going to start off with talking about the Los Angeles Human and Animal Welfare Study. This is brand new, just happened this year, and it was conducted to identify and amplify community-driven solutions to various human and companion issues in LA, specifically for marginalized communities. So this was a community-based participatory research project with 6 focus groups, 27 participants, and it surveyed a total of 247 residents. These organizations are, so we participated, Communities for Better Environment, CARE, the Paw Mission, Downtown Dog Rescue, and Loving Paws are all organizations that helped get people together to kind of answer the survey. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so no surprise here, right? As far as the primary challenges, and I mean, I think every single one of us has talked about this today. But one of the more pressing issues is the lack of pet-friendly housing, right? That's no surprise there. And then next up is the no pet policies, proof of income or financial requirements, pet rent, pet deposits, right? These are all things that people deal with when insuring their pets. Said they were not aware of pet-friendly shelters or temporary housing. And I think Christine touched on that point with interim housing. And it's something that we experience too when we try to connect our client services, what we're just finding is that it's increasingly becoming more and more difficult. And we are seeing an uptick of people that are unhoused with their pet because the rent is too high. And other things, so things that people thought would be really helpful in knowing that's how many pets they have in a home, what pet-related housing fees are legal, what their rights are related to their support animals, the limitations of landlords, like what they can and can't do, and where do people start, right? So these were all things that came out of that survey. Next slide, please. Excellent. And this is a chart that I put together. This year, we were super fortunate to receive a grant to pilot a program with the Los Angeles Animal Services, specifically the South LA shelter. And so we've worked really closely with that shelter to train the staff on what the housing laws are. This is all an effort to keep people together, keep pets out of the shelters. It costs $3,400 to shelter one dog. That's one dog that never gets sick or never needs any medical attention, right? Like high needs vet services. This is for 5 months. The average length, that's the average length of stay. So you see that graph, the cost of care just increases, right, as the months increase. 59% of dogs across LA Animal Services stay in the shelter more than 1 month. So it's over half of the dogs there. With the work that we do, so each time we're able to hire a staff member, 6 households, that's 16 people, and 9 pets. That's the average of people and pets that are able to stay together and housed. So in that way, we're like saving the city money, right? And I think we talked about this too, like where can we better allocate those services? The whole point of this work is to prevent an eviction before it happens, to keep people and their pets together and housed. So this is a little bit more about that program that I was talking about with LA Animal Services. And we have a big A-frame just outside of the doors. And this is what it says, right? Is big letters, is your housing at risk? You don't have to move. You will not be evicted in 3 days. You can get help. There's a QR code that links directly to a form of ours. And we're also present at the pet food pantry there the first Sunday of every month. Where we're able to talk to people about housing. And what we see too is that people need so much more support, right? It's like maybe they don't have a housing problem, but the other thing we do is just connect them with resources that exist. And the need that we're seeing is low cost vet care, right? That's what people really need the most. Access to spay neuter or trap neuter return. We're seeing a lot of requests for that as well. And we also developed a resource guide for shelter workers in order to, quickly reference, is this a housing issue? Or that chart that Diana Prado shared earlier, right? Like, where do we start? Where are we in this process? Did you receive a notice? No, go home, right? Like, go back home with your pet. Was this just via text or verbal? Like, no, go home. There is no eviction happening. And now an organization that provides the free legal service to keep you all together. And at this time, I'll pass it off to Zaira.
Hi, everyone. I'm a paralegal here at Heart, and I've had the privilege of speaking with tenants all across LA. We're supporting them as they're navigating these complexities and just staying housed with their pets. I want to talk a little bit about 2 stories, two individuals that we've had the honor of assisting. First up, we're going to talk about Robert. I think that their experience talk about not just the challenges of being a pet owner in LA and across the country, but also just the strength and resilience that these families have when we show support for them in the community. So Robert lives in LA with his wife and their 2 emotional support dogs, Spot and Doggy. He's been living with cerebral palsy, and his condition started worsening. So his dogs really became a vital companion for him but also for his wife, Anna. And together they've lived in their rent-controlled home for over 10 years, and they've really just built a life there. A few months ago, their stability was threatened because their landlord filed a complaint to LA Animal Services saying that their dog had bitten a neighbor of theirs. An inspector came out to see the home. As you can see on excerpts A and B, those are pictures from the report that they put together. And the inspector saw the dogs, interacted with them and found Doggy and Spot to be friendly and harmless. And despite the report that the inspector put together, the landlord served them a notice demanding them to remove those dogs. So that's when we came into the picture here. Their daughter Gabriela reached out to us in just like a desperate state, looking for some sort of support. During the conversation that she and I shared, she talked a lot about the emotional and physical toll that it had taken her entire family. This situation had taken a lot of energy and had not only risked their housing, but had also worsened Robert's condition. So it was important that we were able to step in to assist them. We advocated for their right to keep their emotional support dogs, and essentially we preserved the housing that they've known for so long. And if we go to the next slide, you guys get to see a little bit more of Spot and Doggy up close and personal. It's a happy ending for them, but it's also work that continues. As of this month, they got served with a second notice after our initial correspondence. So sometimes these kind of cases and individuals need extensive support that we're there to provide, fortunately, so that people can stay with their emotional support animals. And the second person that I want to talk about a little bit is Claudia and Lola. Claudia is a mother of two, and she actually, this was not her first experience with housing insecurity, even despite all the work that she had done to just rebuild her life. Claudia's background is that she was in an abusive relationship with another individual, and as a result, she had spent a year in a women's shelter with her children. She'd worked for that year with a caseworker to secure a housing voucher and was finally just settling into a new chapter. And in that moment, when she felt like she was settled and she had a permanent home, she says, she decided to adopt Lola from the South LA shelter because she felt like Lola was going to provide her some comfort and some security and just put her family first, and get a nice family situation going for herself and her children. But her landlord actually had a really bad bias against large dogs and began harassing her. Unfortunately for Claudia, her landlord lived in the front unit of her unit. So there was not only a notice involved in this, but also yelling and screaming about her dog in front of her neighbors. And so Claudia felt really overwhelmed and afraid, and not only did she fear for her home in this situation, she was also worried about her personal safety. So when she called me, and she called Heart LA for supportive services, what I mainly did in that situation was I listened. In that conversation, I feel like I could really understand her stress. I knew that it was a moment for me to share resources, but also for her to feel heard. In Spanish, we have a word, and it's called desahogar, and that I think that translates directly to undrown. And so those conversations that I have with tenants often provide people a lifeline, just to help them talk about the burdens they've been carrying, and we're there to also provide solutions and support in dealing with that burden and helping them carry that. So for Claudia, we mainly helped her have that support, understand the protections that she has as a tenant with a disability. And we worked closely not only with the landlord, but we also had a lot of conversations and discussions with her Section 8 worker and property management to make sure all those entities were making sure her rights were being upheld and that her family could stay together, with Lola included. And Lola's on the next screen over. She's a beautiful little pitty baby. And I don't know, fans all across the world are in love with her, like me, especially Claudia, right? And she's due to have her baby soon. They're due in December, and Lola's just been really comforting for her at this time. So that's a little bit about the work that we do specifically with tenants. some citations for us, and a thank you.
I think it's great. It opens up for questions, right? And this is my favorite part of when we do these presentations is being able to talk to people and really address, whatever it is they got going on. So let me pull up a question right here. I see one. Diana and Diana, yes, it's both confusing and easy maybe to remember. This is amazing work and filled with really heartbreaking stories. How do you keep yourselves energized and positive to continue this work? I might tap Zaira on this. I feel like you were just talking about this.
I was. I think that the work it could be heavy, but it's also really empowering for me, especially when I'm talking to people who are coming from like very similar backgrounds to mine. For me, I feel really grateful that I'm in a position where I have some of the answers. And obviously, it's not all of them because there are just systemic issues in place that, sometimes I'm talking to a tenant where there are a lot of closed doors and I don't have all the answers for them. But I try to keep a perspective where I try to be grateful for what I do have and grateful for what I am able to provide, even if it's not always, the solution, the answer for everyone. I think I try to keep in mind that I'm not always going to have that answer for people, unfortunately. And the other thing that I have is my beautiful dog, Ophelia, who I just, when all else is bad, she's right there with her little ugly face and I get to look at it and that helps me.
How about you, Prado, with all the wonders of being an attorney? How do you find time to relieve some of that stress?
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, I love yoga. I do yoga and I dance. So I tell everyone that I at least when I'm feeling really stressed out or I'm feeling really even down, I just turn on my favorite song. And normally my favorite song leads to like 2 favorite songs or 3 favorite songs. And then I just find myself dancing for about a good 5-10 minutes and releasing a lot of serotonin. And really, I'm like, yeah, making my own self laugh by my own dancing. And it's simple and it's free.
Yes. I see one from Christine in the chat here, and this is a question that came up earlier. Can you address a question that came up in a previous session? That was yours, Christine. Who can write an emotional support animal letter?
Yeah, and I think Christine kind of answered it too. Any reliable person that is able to state that and give personal knowledge that the person that they're writing a letter for, that they know that this is a person with a disability and that the companion animal alleviates symptoms of their disability. And on the letter, they need to be able to have some, their address and the phone number, email to be able to reach that. But a reliable person includes the normal go-to is a healthcare provider, but healthcare access is very not accessible. And or even access to a therapist is not accessible. So a social worker, if someone's in AA or NA, they're I was about to say they're a guide, but that's not the word I'm looking for. They're
Sponsored?
Thank you. Thank you, Cruz. Their sponsor, someone from a guidance counselor, and even someone can self-certify. So if somebody receives disability benefits from the state or the federal government, then they themselves have been determined a person with a disability. And so they would be able to self-certify saying that I already received disability benefits. I've been deemed a person with a disability from either the federal or the state government. And so my companion animal alleviates symptoms of my disability.
Yeah, and I think I want to touch on a question that someone had earlier as well. And there was a question on how to address a situation when a provider is not willing to write a letter. And Zaira, you've done this a few times now. Do you want to take a stab at that one?
Ooh, well, there's a lot of different third parties that are able to write a letter, and in California, there's also some other ways to get an ESA letter. So, if a person is working with a social worker, if they're a part of interim housing, or they have some sort of other caseworker involved in their life, that caseworker is a knowledgeable third party who could help them with getting an ESA letter if they need one. And usually, the approach is for for us to have communication with that caseworker, just be a resource for them where they can ask questions if they have any, and then assist their client in getting that ESA letter in. The other option for California is if you receive disability already from the state, then that gives you the eligibility to just self-certify that you need an emotional support animal. And then we have a few resources there for tenants who are having that specific situation. So we could get all the documents that they needed in place.
The next question is, do you have a database for similar organizations in other areas of the country? Erin, I'm wondering if that's like an organization like ours that provides like the very niche like service that we do. To my knowledge, we are the only organization in the nation that does this direct legal service for people and pets. But there are organizations nationwide that I know like do a lot of great advocacy, but I don't off the top of my head know if there's a database. Zaira Prado.
No, I would only, there are legal aid organizations across the nation that provide eviction defense. And we can throw in I'll find a link of where you can find a legal aid organization. I'm thinking of the national, I'm gonna find it real quick, but that would be, a resource, but not specifically a legal aid organization like Heart LA that specifically helps tenants with pets.
This one's from Elizabeth. What happens if a provider rejects an emotional support letter? What's the next step in that process?
I'm like, we can all tackle this, but I'll start with tackling this one. So the next step in that process is really just pushing back. You can reach out to each state has their own, for example, in California, it's the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And you can file a complaint with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. The reality is that they're not going to get back to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing or the Fair Housing Department in your state in a quick enough manner that's going to fix that problem in that instance. So really it's pushing back. It's stating that this is our support letter. Homeless shelters are also held liable to the fair housing laws. And so they're not exempt from fair housing laws. And so it's really just asserting your rights, which is scary, is the reality, right? It's scary. It's not easy. And it's also something that once you do, you kind of feel empowered to do it. And I'm like, you just fight back. And Zaira and Cruz, if you want to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I think just to your point, something else that we do is just make sure that tenants already have the strongest version of an ESA letter that they can. Sometimes tenants will come with ESA letters already in place that perhaps were written by their primary doctor, who might not have a lot of knowledge on the Fair Housing Act, on what kind of language should be included in that letter, and they'll give the tenant something really general that maybe doesn't have all the protections, that maybe doesn't list all of the animals in the home. So what we do just from intake, I guess it's what it would be, would just make sure that the team looks over that letter. It has all the language that's recommended, and that when we do present it to the landlord or property owner, property manager, whoever it is, that it's at its best and strongest form. And then Prado's absolutely right. From there, it's just making sure that if they're fighting, we're fighting back harder.
Right. And a follow-up to this from Elizabeth was, this is specifically if it's a homeless provider that rejects the letter. And we've seen that. Like, I know we've definitely seen that. And I think all it really comes back to is, well, what is reasonable, right? It's a reasonable accommodation. What is it that we're asking for? I like to give like, let's say I wanted like a small pony as an ESA and I wanted to build a barn in like on the side of my apartment. Maybe that's not reasonable, right? To most people, that might not be so reasonable. But if it's somebody at a shelter that wants to bring like their cat with them, for instance, right? Well, okay, the shelter doesn't want a cat running around. Can we connect this person with a crate? with a leash? Can we get creative on how to actually like keep them together and address the shelter's policies in a way that it is reasonable, right? Because the denials are, you can deny an ESA, but they have to be like pretty egregious. It has to be not reasonable. Maybe the landlord won't build me my small barn for my pony, right? But like what the thing is, most of the time we can come together for a solution for something that is reasonable. And that way keep them together. And a lot of it is also just kind of education. I know some managers might not be maybe up to speed on what the law is, because the law is very confusing, right? It's not, I don't think it's really designed for it to be easy to read and understand. But oftentimes once we start that letter, right, we have communication, it's kind of just a back and forth of like, this is the law, these are your duties, you are a housing provider, right, as a shelter. Let's jump back into another question. I saw one from Christine in the chat. Heart LA is a special organization, one of a kind. How do you recommend animal welfare organizations in other places that don't have access to Heart LA approach their eviction prevention and legal aid orgs about including animals in the work they do?
You know, I think it's just perhaps going to, if there is a community fair that a legal aid organization is going to introduce yourself and talk to them and letting them know the importance of including animals, also perhaps providing your assistance. So if you're an animal welfare organization that helps provide spay neuter vouchers or helps provide food or leashes, toys for cats and animals and all the animals, providing that resource to a legal aid organization, so you're working together. That's what we do with our animal welfare organizations. Many times we need crates or we need, a litter box or whatever, and so that's how we partner up. So I think it's also providing your services and your resources. I mean, I will say that legal aid organizations, just like animal well-being organizations, are overwhelmed, underfunded, and it's more about not necessarily placing more work on them, but also providing resources and letting them know that you are part of the solution with them, and that if they have tenants with pets, that you also have an understanding of how you can finally help them as well, and then you guys can work together.
This is from Kelly. We kind of touched on it, but maybe Diana or, Prado. I am Diana as well. It's so confusing to say my name. Human shelters are not exempt from ESA. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, I think in terms of they are still subject to fair housing laws. So federal fair housing laws state that human shelters need to be able to abide by fair housing laws, and fair housing laws are what cover emotional support animals. And so if you are a human that has a support animal and wants to enter a shelter and you have an emotional support letter for your animal, then they cannot reject you, just blanket give a rejection. Most of the time what happens, and I'm sure Christine touched on this a little bit this morning, is in regards to not many shelters are capable of being able to take in everybody with a pet, right? And so they can be able to say that, well, we recognize that you're a person with a disability and we recognize that this is your support animal. At this moment, we don't have the capacity to be able to accommodate you and your pet. It may be an undue financial burden for us right now and an undue burden because everyone's placed together. In those moments, what we do is we reach out to an animal welfare organization and one of our local partners and see if they have a crate that our client can borrow, or see if there's some type of other means to be able to house both the person and their pet in the human shelter.
Cole asks, can you point us to any legal authority for the point that people receiving disability benefits can self-certify their need for an ESA?
Yeah, I'm going to throw in here in the chat a great assistance animal guide from the HUD website. And so this will answer a lot of questions and provides a lot of legal resources. We also have this on our website as a legal resource. And so, and it goes like question by question. It's great.
How can I get the guidance regarding pets and housing? Do you have info that you can send me? I think a lot of the resources that we're sharing today, I think I know they're going to be on Maddie's Pet Forum. I think follow up on there for sure. We can also share this link that Prado put in. If you want to dig through the law, I know it's so much fun to do. But it's there, right? It's written and it's our job to kind of help disseminate this information and make it easier and more accessible to understand. Let's start here from the top. How does the legal process differ for tenants with emotional support animals versus other types of pets?
The eviction process doesn't change. It's just that the protections that are available for a person with a support animal differ than from a person with a disability with a support animal versus a person that is not a person with a disability and has a companion animal. And so the eviction process doesn't change. There still needs to be a notice. There still needs to be certain days and a legal process that goes through. It's just what protections are available to them differ. And so someone that is a person with a disability and has a support animal has more protections available to them than a person that is not a person with a disability. And those are just our fair housing rights laws that we've had for quite some time.
And a shameless plug here. Thanks, Charlotte. Charlotte's recommending our free self-paced course on Maddie's University. And the course seeks to help you be in the best position to help a person and their companion animal remain together in their home. So that was specifically designed for shelter workers. Is that right, Prado?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Excellent. Next question. Are there any recent data trends that have shifted Hard LA's approach to tenant protections?
Sadly, and then I'll let also Cruz the data guru and Zaira who's reaching out with the clients. But just to point out, which we already stated in our presentation, eviction numbers have been on a rise. It's not that the pandemic slowed that down. It actually made it higher. And so one of the biggest trends of higher evictions is more people in need, right? And trying to get out more in the community, and particularly the community of the people that are like us, that we serve, and that are most in need. So that is, Spanish-speaking community, the communities that are mostly like neglected, and, so it's reaching out to those much needed communities.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a trend that I'm seeing, which isn't great, and I mentioned this before too, but I'm seeing an uptick in people that are unhoused that are reaching out to us for support. And I know one that, and the question wasn't directly like pet related initially. The question was, I need help getting my car out of impound, right? Which to us, we're like, well, that's not pet related, but let's call and figure out. So Zaira had this conversation with this person. Turns out this person is unhoused and they were living in their car. They were living in the car with their dog. So he also needed dog food and like other pet related resources. And on our end, it's like, okay, I don't know how to get a car out of impound, but let's figure that out. Let's like see who's helping do that. And I feel like that's, as far as like what I'm seeing, we are plugging in more resources for people that are unhoused, for like various like things like that aren't quite in our wheelhouse, but are directly related to the work that we do. Do you have anything else to add, Zaira?
I think kind of to go hand in hand with that is just people needing more basic resources. It seems like they need access to low cost vet care. They need access to food. And I think those are just two of of Maslow's hierarchy of needs that's like at the bottom level. And so obviously I think that alongside the housing crisis that we're seeing in our community, it's also having a larger effect on what people are able to afford, and they need those resources for just more support with meeting the needs of their pets and companions.
So one that just came in from Jonathan. How about temporary boarding?
How about temporary boarding? I mean, Diana's talking about having more people who are in unhoused situations, and we're getting a lot more questions about temporary boarding. We have like a guide that we developed for that, specific to LA. That's not something that has been too helpful for people who are unhoused, unfortunately, because we don't know of a lot of organizations that are providing that for free, with the exception of some individuals who have been in like domestic violence situations or things like that. But I do know that, people in those situations, it's conversations that we have, kind of just in terms of troubleshooting, seeing if we can get them to take their pets with them wherever it is that they're going. If that's a like interim housing or something like that, of trying to get the accommodations in place for them there.
I have a personal question myself. Some of you are familiar with my story of what happened during my stint in homelessness, where I wasn't able to take my cats, my emotional support animals with me. So I had to put them in foster. One of them had passed away. The other two got adopted out. It was a whole mess. But do you support individuals that have gone through this type of situation? As far as, if they do want to turn around and not press charges, I guess like sue the shelter, or they need legal support as far as loss to their family because they did illegally not allow the family to stay together. And also, like, how much of a time window, I believe if there was some kind of incident, it's usually like a 2-year, I don't know how it works in California, but it's like 2 years you have to be able to bring that matter to the legal system.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of, there's been different litigation in terms of categorizing your companion animal as not property and actually having it be labeled as a being. In most states, I believe animals are still viewed as property. I bring that up because then there is a amount, like for example, in California, if it's under $10,000, then it would be small claims, a small claims action. And a small claims action doesn't allow attorneys. And so it would just be an action that one would do on their own. If it's more than $10,000, then, you do involve an attorney. And as someone that's an attorney, the litigation process and the legal process is really racist and isn't here to actually provide solutions to anybody. That's just I know everyone was like, really? Yeah, that's the reality of it, right? The legal system was created, it's working exactly how it should be working, in that it is not actually very helpful. That's why we have 47,000 evictions that are filed in LA County, right? That's why we're rendering 5 families homeless every hour in LA County, because the legal process is working exactly how it's structured to be working. I say that because the reality of having a lawsuit isn't going to solve your problems. Then you have a paper that says that this person owes you money, and then you have to go find that person to actually get them to go get their money. We filed a lawsuit 4 years ago against a now defunct so-called animal rescue that was shut down by the Attorney General that stole an unhoused man's dog, right? And this lawsuit is still 4 years in. 4 years in, because the attorney that they hired continues to do an appeal and file other things and is using the legal system to game the system, because that's how the legal system is used. So I am someone that I am realistic, and I don't like to provide a beautiful, oh, we can do this. The reality is that you can, and probably the easiest form would be small claims in let's say the state of California, without any attorneys, to just go in and follow your own paperwork and go for it, right? Would probably be the easiest process to use in the legal system. Not sure if my crew wants to add something to the sad realities that I just threw out there.
Yeah, I mean, and something I picked up from you as well is that attorneys are not like the end all be all of housing justice, absolutely not. I mean, what is it? It's like a really terrible stat. It's like 98% of landlords go into eviction court with an attorney, and some 3% of tenants that go with an attorney, right? So those odds are not in anyone's favor if you're a tenant. And if you're very lucky to be connected with an organization that provides that direct legal service, great. But there are also so many amazing community-based organizations that are doing like very amazing on the ground work of disrupting that system. And for us, it's really helping people have their own power, right? So it's like I don't like to use the word empower necessarily, but we like to help uplift those voices, right? And what we often get, in Spanish again, in Spanish, it's oh, yo no quiero causar problemas. I don't want to cause any problems. I don't want to cause any problems with my landlord. But you're like, but what we're talking because there is a problem. They caused a problem for you, right? They're asking you to choose between the roof over your head and your companion animal, right? Which is an impossible decision. And in that, I mean, I found Heart LA through community-based organizations, right? I was in a tenants union. I was on my neighborhood council. I was kind of exhausting all the resources I could, and I was very privileged to be able to do that. But in doing that, I went through like 5 different organizations that weren't willing to take our case. And we didn't have the money to spend on an attorney. And the frustrating thing is too that a lot of landlords don't care if you know what your rights are. But when they get that letter from an attorney, they're like, oh, now I actually have to follow the law, right? So I think attorneys are like a tool for housing justice, but definitely not the end all be all. Went on a little rant there, but
It's great clarification, and very helpful information. I figured I'd ask the question because there may be people out there thinking, that the attorneys are the end all be all, So yeah, thank you so much for that.
yeah, definitely. I see one more here. And that question is, what are some of the biggest challenges Heart LA faces in advocating for tenants with pets? Like we're all just looking at each other. I think more and more it's finding being able to connect someone with interim housing in their pet. Like, I think that's like one of our biggest struggles right now is there's a huge need for like temporary boarding and temporary fosters because people ultimately don't want to give their pet up at the shelter, right? They do that as a very um, it's a very difficult decision and one that isn't taken lightly. But if they can prevent doing that, right? Because we always get asked, like, do you have temporary boarding, temporary fosters? And the reality is like, no, that is free, unfortunately, like that we know of. That isn't specifically for like people that are victims of domestic violence or are in like a crisis, like maybe in a home burnt down or something. That's something that we're really struggling with is being able to find like a reliable resource for people in that situation. That's the first thing that comes to my head. Just as like one of the cases we have right now that's difficult. But Zaira, I think I'll pass it off to you.
I think when I heard the question, what I thought was every tenant that I'm speaking to is speaking to me about one of the biggest challenges they're facing. So in that way, every single individual I'm touching base with is just they're having one of the hardest moments in their lives. And I'm not exaggerating because it's a big it's a big hardship really to have to go through, not only to have your housing on the line, but also it's because of your companion animal. And that's just a difficulty to begin with. I think one of the other barriers that I think is difficult, just in general, is depending on where you are located. If you don't have an emotional support animal, some of the housing, you know, protections just are not strong for you, depending on where you are in the city. And you can be a zip code away, and the person, maybe 5, 6 blocks down the street has those stronger protections that you just don't because of where you are. And so that there's that big need for a push for more rent control just in all these smaller places that don't get that kind of attention. Yeah, that's just, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you both hit that right on. And I think at the end of the day, the reason that also Heart LA was founded was to bridge the human animal welfare connection. And in terms of policy, is that a renter's rights protections is an animal welfare issue. And so in order to be able to advocate in your local state for the right to counsel, which means eviction defense attorneys for everyone that's facing eviction, the right to counsel for stronger rental protections, for policies that don't call for pet deposits and pet rent, and advocating for those types of things. A housing issue is an animal welfare issue. And, thanks to Maddie's and Michelson, that's why we are here and having this entire day focused on pet inclusive housing.
That's right. Yeah, it makes me think of the great community effort that we were able to help advance during the emergency period in the city of Los Angeles. There was a law that says, hey, because like the world is kind of burning around us, if you have additional people you need to bring in with you, or additional pets that you need to bring with you that are not on the lease, that's okay, because like we're in an emergency period. But the concern was, when those protections are lifted, what's going to happen, right? Are we just going to get like flooded with 3-day notices to remove the additional people or the additional pets? So we were part of an initiative to help kind of grandfather those in. And that was a huge win for us, right? Because that's another protection. If you live in the city of Los Angeles and you brought your pet in like during this window of time, whether or not they were on the lease, whether or not they're emotional support animal, they can still be with you. So I think it's little wins like that too, where like, what's the challenge, and how can we together as a community, with the other legal service providers, with the other community-based organizations, make a strong case for our clients, right? And really advocate for them, tell those stories, and like why it would be disastrous to everybody to have what was it, the eviction tsunami, the impending eviction tsunami, I think is what one of our colleagues was calling it. Another question popped up here. One of the slides you showed a resource guide that Heart gives to shelter staff. Is that available online? That is a good question. That resource guide was specifically designed for the South LA Animal Shelter. But we're open to figuring out what the laws are where you're at, and helping develop something that's more specific. Because like I said, right, there are laws within the city of LA that are different. We have that special grandfathering in, the other places might not, but other places might have their own protections as well. So generally, like the federal laws will stay the same on that handbook, but otherwise we'd have to dig a little deeper and more specific for those. But that's all the questions that I see in front of me right here. Thank you, Prado. Thank you, Zaira, for joining us. And I'm sure I'll see y'all in a little bit.
Thanks, guys.